Let us get into the wonderful world of Agile Product Development. Mohan, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. So for this, I wanted to talk about what kind of products you might build using what's coined as agile product development, opposed to a different way of building products. So, for example, I work at the Toronto Star, and we just recently built the mobile app and released this, like a new update. So it's a plug. And what I'll say is that you start off by agile development by having the right people. So it's really important to have the right roles, the right players to building the software that you want to build and building the product that you want to build. So the first kind of primary role of the team on the team would be the product manager. Now, the product manager uh, plays a very important role of understanding what it is you want to build, so the vision, and translating that into a way that the rest of the team can understand it. In many ways, they're the quarterback of the team. The next important person on there is the person that's going to be responsible for taking those requirements and understanding how to build them and deliver it into code, and then figuring out how to release that. So let me see if I can step back. We're going to build a mobile app, and the mobile app is going to have a lot of different things that you want to include in there. How are you going to build that is not necessarily a big bang approach. So you may put in there enough so that you can just read the content and read an article, but you want to actually be able to search for an article. Well, that might come in a subsequent release. That kind of management is done by the delivery manager, who, um, if you think of it, is the glue that holds the whole team together. There's a term called Scrum Master, which is a very important role in the Agile world. So people who are familiar with Scrum, which is a form of Agile development, will have heard the role Scrum Master. The product manager is sometimes known as the product owner. So the product owner and the Scrum Master are two of the primary roles, and then you have the team, and the team is composed of your developers and your testers. And you also have designers. So I'll talk first about the designers. So in building out your application, you want to think about how it's going to look. What is the interactions of that going to be, and how are people expecting it to work? So a lot more in that science today than it was when we built applications in the past. So things like user testing is very um, baked into that agile process. So we'll take an application and have users give us feedback before we actually put that application or that feature into the hands of actual users. Um, in a way, they're maintaining a certain level of quality in the development of that software. So, yeah, and then I'll talk about the fourth role, which I've alluded to, which is the developers and the testers. And we call them the magicians because they're the ones that make it happen. They build it. So you can have all these people that are there kind of tell you what the strategy is, what the vision is, what the requirements are, putting a plan together. And then you've got people who even make it kind of conceptual and draw the blueprint of it or the designs of it. And then you got to get the people who actually do the work. And these are true magicians. Developers, great developers, make it look so easy. They're the ones who write the code. They're the ones that make sure and maintain that there's the thing works the way it's supposed to. There's not so many bugs in the code, and they're technically managing also the ability to release that into the hands of customers. So those are our magicians. So now, how do we put all those great people together into a process? What does that process look like? Well, there's lots of different ways that people talk about it. At the Toronto Star, we've coined a term called the 5 Ds to make it easy to remember. So the first part of the process is what we call the definition process. And this is where we spend a lot of time on the design, on the strategy and understanding the vision of what we want to build. What are the objectives and the goals of building out this application? So for example, on the star, we want to build an application that is a mobile app that is the best mobile app in the market that allows people to read fresh content all the time. That becomes a strategy, especially the fresh content piece. So how do we build and make sure that the application is serving you as the user who's reading that application um, always fresh content and content that's of interest to you. So that's our goal. Those are our targets. And then we start talking about, well, what's in scope and what's not in scope. Very important, as you heard our friend Jason talk about getting in a project and getting to the end and not having any money left. If you don't manage your scope, you will definitely end up in that position. So that then, as you define the boundaries of what you're going to build, you define how things are supposed to also work and operate. What high level requirements do you need? You're not at this point talking about, I want the button to be blue and I want the background color to be white and I want large images. What you're talking about is I want articles and I want images and I want the ability to navigate to different content. These are the types of requirements that you're talking about at this particular point in time. So the next step in the 5Ds is what we call the design. And this is where you take all those requirements and you start to put it into pretty pictures, if you will call it. And the pictures allow you to understand what is it going to look like when it goes into the hands of people. Start to kind of paint that picture. And a very important part of that is the flow of the application. So how should it navigate? What should happen when the user wants to finish just reading an article? There's many different things that the user could decide to do at that time. They could decide to read another article. They could decide to just not read anything and put their phone away. How should the application behave? Or if they decide to go back to the homepage or they want to search for something, there's lots of different options. So understanding those different flows is part of that. Now, also at this time, we want to understand how you're going to actually potentially build it. And you want to do a little bit of planning around that, the technical aspect of it. And it's important to do that up front because if you do it up front, you'll have identified pitfalls and become more efficient and can move faster. So it's part of Agile process. We do that up front in what we call the design process. The next step is we'll group them together into one step called develop and deploy. They're sometimes treated interchangeably as one, but really this is where you're actually giving the requirements now in the form of what we call small little stories. And these stories are implemented by the developers and they're actually writing code. And then as part of those stories, there's certain acceptance criteria that this is okay. So I need the mobile app when I click on this button to open this page. That is a requirement and that is acceptance criteria. If it works that way, it can be tested and released. So the releasing part is when you put something into the hands, and we call that part of the deploy phase. I'll go on to the next phase. So this is my favorite part of it. You put this thing into production, you've given it into the hands of our customers, and in the Agile world, you're not done. That's just the beginning. This is where you start to say, okay, how are people using this? We look at data. How many pages do people read? How often are they coming back to it? How long do they spend on the site? Which kinds of articles are they reading? All of that information is used to then learn how to make iterative improvements to the product that you build. And if you go to the next page, you'll see that this is actually a circle where you're going through these 5 steps and these 5 phases repetitively and learning feeds and fuels this process throughout. So we're always constantly doing something, test and learn. And that's why when you go to the Apple Store, you download the app, you'll have noticed that there's frequently updates being made. So we just launched the mobile app, and about a week later, we added the ability for people to see it also on a tablet in landscape view, something that wasn't there a week prior, because we knew based on feedback from customers that they wanted that feature really quickly. And we had that baking in the oven so that we could get that out really quickly. That's part of what the feedback does. It allows us to prioritize and decide what to give next. So that's a little bit of insight into what agile product development is.
Thank you, darling. That was fabulous. We have one question so far from Jesse. Thank you, Jesse. With proper process in place, how do you effectively deal with the unexpected? Does process include a buffer of some kind to allow you to pivot or respond to immediate unanticipated priorities?
Great question. So the answer is it's a it's always a game of prioritization. So when something unexpected comes up, um, you need to decide if it's important enough. You need to pivot, because sometimes there isn't a buffer, enough buffer in the process. At that point, you would pivot and break your sprint and break your development process, and move to include that new requirement in there. The other answer to it is there's a natural amount of prioritization that can happen within that time frame to release something that can allow you to be agile. I'll use that word, um, and it's very nice. And the best part of all of this is that you are building out small chunks. So you're not talking about, like I used the example for the landscape, the tablet. It was a week difference. That's pretty quick. So you're not talking about waiting months in order to try to build or reprioritize something. Thanks, Jesse, for that question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I'll give everybody a moment to type them in if they have any questions. While we wait for that, I'll ask Mohan, could you maybe tell us, other than the app, because you've mentioned it a little bit, is there something that you've worked on recently that you're particularly proud of that you could share with us?
Absolutely. So part of what we've been working on is a complete reimagined experience on the core product at the Toronto Star, which is the core website. So the homepage, we built that in a very modular way where you can visit it and see fresh content on the site, content that is also personalized and tailored to your likings. So we kind of know what you'd like to read and what you'd be interested in. And then the other thing I would say is we've worked on a number of onboarding flows for new users. So it's something that we wanted to make sure was working well. And yeah, I'm actually really proud of that feature.
Wonderful. Thank you.